You found this video because you've outgrown your old life one way or another. It seems like the way you used to live, speak, talk, the things you used to like, it just doesn't quite fit anymore. There can be a lot of excitement in this phase, but at the same time, a lot of confusion because you might deep down sense that, okay, you have outgrown an old phase of life, but the next chapter, the next version of you might not be 100% clear yet. So for a lot of people, it can also be a deeply confusing time, especially if your old life, if there's a really strong attachment to your old life. Some people would also feel very emotional during this time because essentially as there's this upgrade, this up leveling that's happening, but there's also a lot of emotional connection and attachment to the old sense of self that if we don't really know how to let go of that, it could feel like we're being pulled in this liminal space and not in a positive way, right? I myself have been in that space many, many times. And one thing I know for sure is that I found it really comforting when I knew that I wasn't going crazy. I was, in fact, upgrading my life, and that there are actually practical steps that could help me find the next version of myself with a bit more ease and clarity. So hopefully by the end of this video, if nothing else shift in your external reality, right? I hope that you can at least find some comfort in your heart, knowing that once again, you're not crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. This is a very natural progression of life, especially in people who are very growth oriented, who are dedicated to their healing and they want to keep growing to be better and better version of themselves. It's almost like in a lifetime, you have to go through millions and millions of funerals for yourself, consciously or unconsciously, just mourning old parts of you, old versions of you that you sadly, or maybe fortunately, can no longer bring into your next chapter of life. Hello, if you're new here, my name is Casey, an emotional alchemy guide. If you're into all things emotional healing, spirituality, self-help, growth, healing, this space is for you. Feel free to hit the subscribe button for new videos every week. Okay, so before we get into the practical steps on how to kind of navigate and approach this period of life, let's just name it, just to make it a little easier for our rational mind. I like to call it the liminal space. Some also call it the transition, different life phases and life seasons. Essentially, it is a period of time where you have outgrown an old version of yourself, but clarity on where you're going next isn't exactly mapped out yet. So we're kind of just feeling like we're floating in this in-between space. Depending on how you look at it, it could be a very, very exciting time because for me at least, it feels like I'm floating in this dark void space where limitless potential and opportunity are within my fingertips. It's like, okay, now I get to have this blank canvas and I can paint my life as the creator of my own life. I can paint my life however way I want to. I also find that during this phase, if we deeply surrender and allow it to, it could be a very powerful manifestation portal because without the kind of emotional attachment of our known world of, the routine and how things are, without that, if we can surrender and relinquish control and attachment to that life, again, it's kind of like a blank canvas. We have this opportunity to imagine what we want for us and then co-create with the universe to make that new reality our new reality. In this space, you might first notice that you feel drawn to many different things. You might start to notice that the world is very large. There are so many different potential and opportunities, whether consciously or unconsciously, you might be looking outward for different experiences. Maybe you're drawn to certain ideas, lifestyle, you're dreaming bigger, even if things don't really make sense, but you're like, hey, wouldn't it be nice to do this or travel to this part of the world? Or you might start scrolling on social media and just seeing how people are living life and wonder if that's possible for you. At this point, again, I find that it's such an exciting time because it's almost like, I believe it was Lacey Phillips who coined the term expanders. It's like you have all these people who are living this like great life that you didn't even imagine was possible. And then now you see that it's possible and you start to dream a little bigger for yourself as well. I find that if you learn how to use this energy, you can keep up leveling and up leveling and up leveling, expanding your world. However, this is the part where a lot of people actually default back to their old life because the mind is overriding things. And it could be due to a lot of different things, but it all comes down to conditioning and belief systems and what we believe can be for us. So this is the part where the mind override things, saying things like, oh no, that's not realistic, like, oh, this person can do this because of this, that person can do that because of that. And on some level, you're not wrong, because we're all equipped with, different stories, experiences, family background, social background. The thing is, it doesn't mean that it's not possible, but the mind at this point, the moment you're expanding, right? The mind is like, oh, it feels a little scary because biologically we're wired for safety. And what often feels foreign doesn't feel safe, right? It doesn't care if you get to be a millionaire the next day or you get to travel the world, as long as it's not what you're used to. The body, the subconscious, a deep part of you that's wired for safety will see that as danger and will try to do its best to default you, bring you back to safety, aka your old life. So again, this is the part where the mind starts to override things and tell you all the reasons why you shouldn't dream big, all the reasons why this is not possible for you, even though it's possible for some people. Or maybe old fears start to creep in, belief systems start to creep in, things you didn't even know that existed in your belief system. It could be some things that your parents used to say a lot that as an adult you've somehow forgotten, like money don't grow on trees, you need to work hard, or this and that. So this is the part where the bigger you dream, the more like pushback you might receive from yourself. But here's the reframe I want you to tell yourself instead. If you're in this liminal space and you're noticing different things and passions and interests and dreams that you have, I want you to know that it is not random. A teacher of mine, Sahara Rose, would always say that your dreams are dreaming you back. And for myself, I also believe that our passions, our skills, our hobbies, they're not random. One person might really like music, but the other person probably couldn't care for it and maybe is really into sports or something else. And I think our interest and our skills and our potentials, there's like a very mysterious ways of why like God planted different seed in each of us, right? I think it's really interesting that as human beings, we have this limiting beliefs that, oh no, not everyone can be rich, not everyone can be the best at what they're doing. The way I see it is a little different. I think that we're all, again, God plants different seeds in all of us, and there's a reason why we are equipped with unique background, unique experiences in life, unique perspective of life, unique interests and hobbies and skills. And even if we're in the same realm, right, we do things differently. For example, there's so many spiritual teachers out there, but the way I say something is very different from, say, Eckhart Tolle says something, or very different from like other spiritual teacher who says something, right? So I could very well let my limiting beliefs limit me, saying that, oh no, but I can't be a spiritual teacher like that because they already exist. But the other way of looking at it is also like, but I have my own experience, my own way of doing things, and it is very unique and it's unique to me. And so coming back to my original point is, during this liminal space, allow yourself to dream in a way that's unproductive, not practical, and just see where it leads you. In a way, deep in your heart, I want you to keep this reframe, knowing that your interest and your passion, what lights you up in this moment, they are not random. They are the very light that is guiding you toward the next version of you. And you don't really have to see the full picture before you take the next step. Which leads me to my second path, that a lot of times, especially if we're trained in a very rigid system, for example, me living in Hong Kong, I see that everyone, because we're trained to view the world that way, we have like a very rigid system of like, okay, from this age to this age, I'm supposed to be in school, I'm supposed to do XYZ, and then here on out, I'm supposed to get my first job, and then this, and the retirement plan. And everyone have a very rigid way of kind of already planning their whole life, right? And one thing I love to say is that if you plan life down to every little detail, you don't really leave a lot of room for miracle to enter. And we can't really know with our limited mind and our limited knowledge of things what life has planned for us. I deeply believe that there is a bigger power that look after us as human beings. Yes, we are immensely powerful at ourselves, but I also find deep comfort in surrendering my own agenda, my own timeline of things, my own plan of things, because I don't know better than Source knows. I don't know better than God, the universe knows. So a lot of people want clarity of the whole picture before they even begin to take the next step. And if you're in this liminal space, and if you resonate with my words and my sharings and my experience, then maybe this path would suit you and serve you quite well as well, which is to take the next step first, and then the next step, and then the next step. And then eventually, before you even know it, the whole path If you look back, the whole path has been shown. I also find that this is a much better way of approaching the liminal space because clarity often doesn't come from thinking alone. We can think and plan all we want in our head, but the moment we step out into the real world and we take action, we'll find that there's so many factors that's out of our control, right? People might not resonate with what you intended for them to resonate with. Maybe new opportunities come in your way. Maybe you know more, and then now different your plans change. So you never really know. Again, so my advice, my reframe for you is to take one step at a time and then allow the universe to meet you halfway. And in essence, co-creating with the universe, with this greater life force energy to bring you to what life has intended for you. In a practical way, I find that clarity also comes from experience. Again, we have such limited view and knowledge of the world that sometimes the reason we can't see what's next is because that reality doesn't yet exist in our current world. For example, if growing up and you know how people always ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? I always think back to this example because I remember people kept asking me what I wanted to do when I grew up. But all I knew was professions like, oh, you can be a doctor or a lawyer or a policeman or a fireman, you know, things like this. And then it wasn't until when I reached like my 20s or so that when I go out and talk to people and ask them what they do for a living, there are all of these professions that I've never heard of. It's like the niches of niche. It's like, I remember the first time I felt this way was when someone told me that they were doing something in food management in a compliance company in like, I don't even remember, but it was just so niche. And I was like, I didn't even know that this existed. And I asked her if she enjoyed her job, and she seemed to have really enjoyed the challenges that, you know, she gets to problem solve every day. But I remember just thinking about how I was not even taught that this was possible. And I was so confused as to how she even found that job. I was like, what do you want? So that's what I mean by sometimes what we want for ourselves or what is actually intended for us, we can't just think our way into it, especially when it's not yet in our reality. And so for me, things really shifted and more clarity came in when I changed and expanded my environment. This happened really quickly when I moved to Bali. I lived there for around a year. During that time, I got to meet a lot of different people, you know, people from all around the world, a lot of teachers, but also entrepreneurs, people who are doing things half and half. They own this thing and it was just such a different life that I thought was possible. And I remember meeting this girl who her full-time job was like teaching twerk shop, you know, teaching people how to twerk. And like, if I didn't know that if I didn't see that that was possible, I would have never, like, in my little brain, right? Even if I'm thinking about like mapping out my next step, I would have never been able to plan that for myself. And I'm very sure that this is also not something that she, maybe like her 6-year-old self, had planned for herself, right? I'm pretty sure that this is something that as she takes life one step at a time, different doors start to open for her. Maybe she got to meet different people. She took some classes and then she found that, oh, I have the skills and I have this passion. And then maybe it wasn't even a thing until she made it a thing, right? That year in Bali really opened my eyes to what was possible. I also remember meeting a lot of people who were hosting retreats, and it seemed like they weren't really working. I mean, I'm sure they were, but they were also living a very different life from what I was taught living in a city like Hong Kong, that you have to hustle, like time is money, you have to work 10, 12, 14 hours a day just to make a decent enough living. And then there I was meeting people who, first of all, loved their job to death. Second of all, they didn't really have to trade their time for money, which was a vastly different concept from what I've been taught and also from what I've seen my whole life. There are people who taught like held retreats, say 4 times a year, and then the rest of the time they really focused on their family or their own learnings or something else, right? So even like the lifestyle was something that I never dreamt was possible. So seeing all these different examples and how real people were living life like this really expanded my world of what was possible. And I started to let the old versions, as in like the old way of seeing things, how life needs to be structured, I started letting that go. And it was when I started letting that go that the new version of what was possible for me had the space to come in. I'm like, okay, even though this is not my known reality, like my old known reality, maybe it's possible that I do my purpose this way and that way, even though like no one in my family has done it before. But okay, maybe it's possible. And then I take it one step at a time. And the moment I intended for my life to be in that way, different doors start to open up. So, yeah, you never really know what life is going to lead you. All we can do is to follow the calling of our passion, to follow the calling of life and trust it and co create with the universe to the best of our abilities. So, coming back to our practical grounded reality, what we can do is simply to give yourself the permission slip to not need to wait for the full picture before you take the next step. So even thinking about this week, what is like a little pull in your heart that you can follow? Even if it doesn't, practically speaking, logically speaking, lead you to something big, right? What is that one pull that you can follow, that one voice that you can follow? Is it signing up for a class in your city that you've never heard of, that none of your friends do, but you feel like this, oh, this is so interesting? Or is it finally signing up for that teacher training that you've always dreamt of, but it's not realistic, it's too far away, you don't know what you're going to do with a certification, or maybe it's something else? And now I'm going to address something that's very real, because when you start moving differently in the ways that I've just mapped out and shared with you, you'll find that not everyone's going to understand. And this is because you're stepping outside of what is known and familiar for you, but also for the people around you. To your family, you're always the one who does things this way, right? Since at a young age. And then maybe to your coworkers, they only see the side of you like, oh no, like they would never do this, she would never do this. Or maybe to even your childhood friends, right? They have this like known idea of you. And what I find is the moment we step out of that for ourselves, even if we're just doing it for ourselves, sometimes we can get pushback for people. You don't always have to take it personally. Sometimes it's projection, sometimes it's fear. There's so much that can be going on in relationship dynamic, especially in romantic relationship. This can come up quite noticeably, because the moment one partner shift, it's like it changes the whole dynamic of the relationship that you're in. Maybe sometimes people would react negatively, not because you can't do it or you're bad or you're stupid, but because then it completely disrupts their worldview and their relationship to you. And yeah, in other words, completely disrupts their world as well. So coming back to, if you remember my first point, I mentioned our nervous system, this subconscious part, this deep part of us, we don't always know what's best for us. We want what's known and feel safe and familiar to us, right? Oftentimes in, let it be family dynamic or relationship dynamic or even just friendship dynamic, what I see a lot, especially in healing sections, is that the moment one person chooses to upgrade themselves, does things a little differently, other people are like, no, 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 don't do this, don't go. People might try their best to convince you to stay the same, because in having you stay the same, it brings safety to their world and their worldview as well. I'm not saying that people do this because, out of malice or because they're bad or evil. I'm just saying that a lot of people do this consciously or unconsciously to keep themselves safe, to protect known dynamics. Coming back to my original point, the moment you decide to question things or uplevel your life, you might be met with doubts, with questions, and even resistance. I'm just sharing this as well to let you know that this is completely normal. And what I've learned is, instead of trying to convince everyone why this is a better path for you, ask yourself, would you rather spend all your energy explaining yourself or channel that energy into actually living your life? In the very beginning of my journey, where I was like constantly having these up levels, right? So I'm constantly in this liminal space and then new life, liminal space, new life. At first, I really wanted people to understand me. I really wanted everyone to support me. I really wanted people to see why this is a good and best decision that I can make for myself, because I'm growing and living so much. But after some time, just like the reframe I gave you, I decided that I wanted to conserve my energy, because energy is so precious and I don't want to waste my energy, my precious time explaining to people why it's a good decision, why they should let me live my life. And I instead decided to channel my energy into actually doing research, actually doing trainings, actually doing the things that I love that can benefit myself. And I chose to do that without needing everyone's approval. And not to say that, it's me against the world. Of course, there are going to be people who really understand you. There are going to be people who, even if they might not understand, they'll try their best to support you. But in essence, I decided that it's a lot more helpful when we're in the liminal space to protect our in-between space. Which brings me to my next point, which is something that I don't think people talk enough about. that the liminal space, the transition space between life phases is so, so tender. It's so precious. It's like this little seed that's deep, deep, deep in the soil and the mud. And I realized that not every idea needs to be shared immediately, especially relating to our last point, right? Not everyone's able to see things that's for your best and highest good. A lot of times when the moment God planted a little seed in us and then we go out to share it with the world, I believe that energy is energy, and other people's doubts and resistance can also interact with our fields and hence interact with the potential that lies in that little seed that we have just received. And I wish I could remember where I saw this quote, this metaphor first, but I really can't. But I came across this some time ago that just like how you're planting a seed, you don't dig it up every 5 days or so to see if it's growing, right? You just let it be there. And there's a certain level of trust, trusting that while you're nourishing every day and you're doing all the right things, that it will grow in its own time. But in the beginning, just give it time, give it space, and that it can take root and grow. Right now, know that you're in the middle of becoming someone new, and it's such an incredibly exciting time for you, even if it could be slightly confusing and a little overwhelming. Maybe different emotional themes are being stirred up, right? Like old fears, or even your relationship with people who, like one of the things that we talked about, you deeply want to seek their approval and understanding, and maybe people don't really understand you in that way. And so this is a time that could stir up so much, but I want you to trust that there's a reason why you've been brought and led to this point in time. And that if you trust it and continue to nourish your liminal space, this transition time of yours, you are and you will continue to be guided to newer and newer heights for yourself. At the same time, though, I want to remind you something that is a little controversial or different from what a lot of spiritual teachers talk about, which is essentially you're manifesting a new life, right? You're calling in something new for yourself, hopefully something bigger and better. In manifesting this new aligned life, it also doesn't mean that life needs to just give it to you, hand it to you. Even if nothing in your external world is happening, like, you're not doing anything, quote unquote, what I found and learned is that you also have to become the version of yourself that can hold this new life. And this liminal space is actually such a good opportunity for you to keep growing and working on yourself, doing the inner work, the self-healing, the reflection, and the different steps that you need to take so that you can release the emotional attachment to your old life, to things that no longer serve you, so that you have the space to really step into this new version of yourself, this new reality, when that reality inevitably become yours. Thank you for tuning into today's video. I hope that you found it helpful. If you don't want to miss these weekly videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you have any comments, feedback, shares that you want to let me know, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And I'll see you soon.